It's been a really interesting period in the telco world over the last few years. It seems like things are getting pretty exciting sort of across lots of areas of tech and telecommunications. There seems to be a lot of competition, a lot of innovation.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host Paul Spain, and today we have Stephen Phillips from Sneak joining us again. How are you, Stephen?
Very good, thanks, Paul.
Great to have you back on the New Zealand Tech Podcast. Lots going on this week. There's space news, there's 5G spectrum being dished out, more space news, new data centers, and sort of mobile/space news. And that's just on the New Zealand front. Google's trying to have a bit of a punch up with OpenAI, with their Google Bard, ChatGPT. They've got their Flexi folding phone out. So lots we can delve into. Just trying to think what we should start with. Well, first, of course, we should start with thanking our show partners. So big thank you to 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark NZ, HP, and Gorilla Technology for supporting the New Zealand Tech Podcast and all the support that they provide for the broader tech and innovation ecosystems here in New Zealand. First up, let's talk a little bit about this extra spectrum that we've kind of been waiting for, and the government have moved ahead, and they have reached an agreement with the telcos that we mentioned previously, with Spark, 2 Degrees, and 1NZ, and basically that's going to help facilitate sort of faster rollout of 5G around the country. They're allocating the 3.5 gigahertz spectrum now, which, I guess where it sits between, some of the other bands means it gives you a bit of a balance in terms of its ability to penetrate buildings and, cover a broad area and deliver some pretty good performance. So it should be good all round, shouldn't it?
Yeah, it should. The fill-in for especially some of the, the more rural towns that have got more hills and the likes, peaks and troughs. It's really good for tactically getting into those sort of areas as opposed to flat plains.
Yeah, and look, it's been a really interesting period in the telco world over the last few years. It seems like things are getting pretty exciting sort of across lots of areas of tech and telecommunications. There seems to be a lot of competition, a lot of innovation, and having this spectrum becoming available just adds to, I guess, what we can do locally with more happening in the world of sort of satellite communications. Starlink obviously has been playing a role for a lot of people in the rural world, but we will see likely some continued sort of twisting of knobs, shall we say, in terms of adjusting prices and service offerings from Starlink, and then we'll see other players coming into that market, over the next little while. And certainly it seems that Musk, with his businesses, he's not afraid to try different things out. So it's it is very, very interesting, and but very pleasing to see that 3.5 gigahertz spectrum is going to be available and provide some help.
Yeah, we really will get to 100% maybe next year.
Yeah. Yes, more coverage, bring it on. And then so also, and this sort of is I guess a bit of a crossover, but when was it? Just a week and a bit ago. I was down in Christchurch with the council down there. They were doing a little bit of a show and tell, I suppose, for a few media folks, and I was able to tag along as part of that. One of the places that we got to was Dawn Aerospace, and some listeners will recall the episode going back probably about 2 years with Stefan Powell. where we talked about Dawn Aerospace and the story. And ever since, well, probably even before then, I was really looking forward to seeing their Aurora suborbital space plane, and I finally got to have hands on with the technology.
Nice.
It's not quite big enough to jump inside of, but it was pretty exciting all the same to see it. And one of the things that was revealed to those in attendance was that Dawn Aerospace has won a pretty key contract with Link, who are the Starlink rival that 2 Degrees are partnering with to deliver their satellite connectivity. So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like satellite business is going to be key to staying relevant in the telecommunications sort of game. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean it is. It is kind of amazing how some of these things we hear about them for years and years and years in varying forms, often quite under the radar until they're sort of super getting super real, I suppose, and that's where we're at now with mobiles being able to connect to satellites, and had heard a little bit of an upfront on which came Monday morning, I think our time. Their satellite communications for iPhone 14s and beyond is covering New Zealand and Australia now. So that's their little nudge of for those that are like, ooh, do I need the latest iPhone? So Stephen, there's another reason for you to consider. I know we've been talking about that recently.
So my 13 doesn't cut it anymore. Oh no.
No,
I might hold out for the 15.
So there's a whole lot of good stuff going on there. Great to hear that news from Dawn Aerospace, and also got to we got to go around different parts of their operations and so on in Christchurch, and yeah, it was pretty impressive to hear about their growth. They're growing by adding about one person a week. So I think they're expecting to be, is it somewhere between 160, maybe around 160 to or more people by the end of the year, maybe even 180. So they're growing very quickly, sort of roughly. It's reasonably evenly split by the sounds of it between New Zealand and the Netherlands. But very cool to get to visit and to see that. Now also on the space front, we just heard about the latest update from Zeno, who of course we had on the podcast a few weeks ago. Zero Astronautics have announced that they've now surpassed 75 million New Zealand dollars in product sales. Wow. So they are moving at a really, really fast clip. And I think, it's going to be very exciting to see, how they go, once they've got their superconducting magnet technology up in space in the second half of the year. Just how quickly things accelerate from there. But this, to me, kind of sounds like, here comes another very large business for New Zealand in the global space sector. So really exciting.
Yeah, well, their tech really changes the economics of satellites. It's probably akin to the move from sort of ice vehicles to electric vehicles. Changes the game.
It seems like a real game changer, and of course you've got to have innovation in all sorts of places for, I guess, the future to arrive. And as we've seen sort of, Rocket Lab and others with, lower cost opportunities to get into space, the economics have to, keep improving in all those areas for it to really sort of stack up well. I think Zeno are in a very strong position as the sector grows. So really, really, really pleasing to see, and we'll certainly look forward to continuing to watch their story. Now, more on the data center front, we've heard recently about Spark, growing their investment in New Zealand on that front. Of course, we've got the hyperscale, data centers. We've got a very recent announcement from AWS in terms of buying a lot of renewable energy that they're going to be tapping into directly rather than it going into the national grid, which is that sort of could spark a whole deep discussion around how that plays out. But it's certainly to me that type of deal can change the economics behind in investments in renewable and wind and solar and so on when these sort of deals are happening. But next DC seems to be the next cab off the rank, as it were, in terms of moving forward with their first New Zealand facility. And there's a couple of write-ups there with Herald and Reseller News, sort of covering some of the thoughts on that. And looks as though they've acquired a reasonable chunk of real estate in the Auckland CBD. So
you can never have too many clouds.
Well, it's something that obviously there's going to be a growing, continuously growing demand for quite some time to come, and it's sort of mind blowing the activity that we're getting on that front compared to if we were to jump back say 5 years. There were bits and pieces happening, but now it just it's an explosion and absolutely massive investment. So I think very, very, very encouraging for where things are heading for New Zealand.
Yeah, because the last generation of data centers, Datacom and Spark put in, they're going back nearly sort of a decade and all now. And how you design data centers for the scale that the big cloud providers is looking is very different. So it's about time for another generation of data centers.
Yeah. No, very, very, very encouraging. And 2 Degrees have shared some extra information around their partnership with Link, who are putting up their low Earth orbit satellites, which alongside the varying other ones like Starlink that are going up, and that's how 2 Degrees are expecting to also provide 100% coverage across New Zealand with their satellite to phone connectivity. What they've said is that they're expecting to be in a position to do their first testing of this in June. So that's all. It's all kind of moving ahead quite quickly.
Yeah, Mark likes sometimes first mover advantage, but I think you'll settle with second mover advantage in this time.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I guess they're trying to be ahead of Starlink, so we will see. And then, but I guess then you've got Apple in there, so it's kind of there's so much going on when it comes to satellite to mobile connectivity, isn't there? And we will no doubt hear a formal announcement from Spark at some stage in the not too distant future. They've certainly indicated that how we put it, they're playing in this space. Really really encouraging. A lot of exciting things going on. Now, we would be remiss not to talk a little bit about Google this week, because they have been they've had their annual Google I/O conference, and there's always a good chunk of announcements at I/O, although it does sort of vary from year to year in terms of whether they're a little bit ho-hum or whether there's really exciting things happening. I would say this year they're a bit more on the exciting front. So you can now, not much use for us in New Zealand, but if you're in certain other markets, you will have the opportunity to buy a folding phone from Google. So that's kind of cool. And of course, you will be able to source them in New Zealand, but no, I haven't seen anything official from Google that they'd actually be formally launching in the New Zealand market. Why do you think are we just not big enough as a country, do you think?
I think
Too
there is
small a market?
I think there's a rounding error problem.
So the Pixel Fold, it does look very cool. It's curious. I was looking back on the first foldable phone, which was the Flex Pi, and I shared it to my Instagram at CES. Maybe it was 2019, I think. Yep. Yeah, we're now over 4 years on from that point, and it's become a very mainstream technology. The Flex Pi didn't seem to get to do very well, but certainly the big players are there, except noticeably Apple. What's your pick? Is Apple going to be offering a folding phone? Is it a short time or a long time away? Because there's an interesting aspect from the perspective. There's definitely a demand. People like these phones. They're very pricey, so there's a big premium you pay for the capability, and we tend to see Apple playing in that higher end area most of the time. It's just is the technology sort of good enough and mature enough, still seem to be at risk from a dust incursion perspective. So some challenges.
Yeah, I think it'll probably cannibalise the iPad entry point of the iPad market for them. So I don't think they'll go there. I think if anything, they're heading back towards with the Mini. They're starting to tout the benefits of the Mini, that you can reach all parts of the screen. And
Yep.
I don't think they'll go there.
Well, I guess we'll wait and see how it plays out. Probably the big one for many from Google I/O would be Google Bard, and that's available right now. Bards.google.com if you want to take a look. And this is really Google saying, "Hey, we're here when it comes to generative AI type capability." Very much head-on attack on ChatGPT and what Microsoft is doing with their Bing chat as well. Looks pretty interesting. I think we're going to see, continued competition in this space, but we're going to see these iterations happen where the visual side, generating graphics, and they've announced a partnership there with Adobe, and then the automation of apps and tying everything together. So you can give your software a bit of instruction, and it goes away and does a lot for you.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to play with Bard yet, but I think Google's hand was forced to a degree. They kind of had to bring something to the market because all of the commercial sort of arrangements otherwise would have already been reached. So, but I think they did it sort of probably earlier than they wanted to. I suspect it was because they were putting more checks and balances around basically their offering than what people were saying of the alternative.
I think, there's often a benefit in competition, isn't there? And in the world of tech and in lots of other areas too. And look, from what I've seen of Bard so far, it compares reasonably well with ChatGPT. They definitely have their own kinks and uniques and so on. But I imagine they're going to iterate on it reasonably quickly. How it plays out, though, for those that are trying to decide which direction is it going to go, is it going to go more in an open AI direction, more in a Google direction? What's going to happen to the overall success of, say, Google or Alphabet versus Microsoft?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's pretty hard to pick at the moment. Yeah. I think Microsoft has a unique in that their productivity software is so heavily used. Such a large market share compared to what Google have, that there's a pretty big upside for them from a financial perspective, right? Being able to add it to add AI, basically to all the tools that are used by the majority of organisations today. That's going to bring a fairly large uptick. Now, I'm sure there'll be other options other than what they bring to market, depending on how they price it and so on. But having that option as another thing that they can add on and squeeze a little bit more or a lot more revenue out of businesses is potentially going to make a massive difference to their revenues over the next decade. Kind of quite scary, the potential, scale of that. And I guess the question is, how much can the market bear when you bring a tool that's so powerful? Yeah. If you can double the productivity of a bunch of workloads, which of course there are certain things where you're a lot more than double a workload, but other areas where really you can't help too much at all. Yeah. But if you bring that sort of level, what can you charge for it? And I don't know. It's a little bit worrying to think of how much Microsoft could charge for some of these capabilities.
Yeah, I struggle sometimes just with typos. I wonder what an AIO is going to sort of. You're writing a business contract and it gets the context or sentiment slightly wrong.
Oh dear!
If you don't proofread it.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to need to have a lot more layers, aren't we? I mean, at the moment we're seeing this kind of, what's coming out of ChatGPT and Bard. Doesn't seem to go through the layers of verification. You can go back after it generates something and say, "Hey, can you check, is this accurate? You made any mistakes?" And more often than not, depending on what your what sort of prompt you've put in, you're likely to have the AI coming back. Yeah. Cap in hand and apologising for making a hash of what you gave it to do.
So, does it make good decisions from a legal precedence perspective and the likes? I think that's an angle we're going to have to look at, or does it just sound right?
Well, and certainly, we've seen those sort of hallucination type things, and I saw an example from. A friend of mine, he's a journalist for Tom's Hardware in the States. Yep. Actually, if you're kind of looking for some of the the most interesting and relevant coverage on what AI is doing from a journalist's perspective, and someone who. I think is genuinely concerned maybe with how enthusiastic people like me can be around the technology. Look him up. His name is Avram Pilch. Geek in Chief is his Twitter handle, and quite interesting to follow some of his little commentaries. I mean, there are so many people talking about AI on Twitter at the moment. Avram's, he doesn't have a massive following on Twitter, like some folks who are really kind of, shouting their messages, but he's bringing probably a different perspective than what we're seeing through a lot of those bigger voices. And his most recent tweet 18 minutes ago, he's asked the question, what is the best laptop for productivity and battery life? And this is on Bard, and it comes back with some responses. And then he's asked, what's the source of this information? Back to Bard. And the response doesn't provide any links. It just provides, it came from Laptop Mag, PC Mag, Tom's Guide, CNET, etc. So there's definitely some challenges and shortcomings, especially when this technology is relying, on content that humans have spent an incredible amount of time, researching and creating and putting it out there. And we've seen recently some discussion around, or some research being done around, copywriting AI-generated content, and that seems to be creating some challenges, because I think certainly in the US Copyright Office is not doesn't seem particularly comfortable to allow you to assign copyright to something that's been generated by an AI. I wonder why.
Exactly. Yeah, there's certainly some experimenting going on in some of the mainstream media companies in New Zealand, and they have to look at these types of avenues, because with ad revenues and all under pressure, they're looking at how can you be more efficient.
Well, one of our podcasters, Darcy, who does the NZ Everyday Investor, he started putting out some AI episodes, so that one's worth looking at if you want to get a handle on the way that AI can be utilised in terms of content creation. And it's got Darcy on there, but there's also I guess his supporting contributors are AIs on these particular episodes, which are like an AMA, Ask Me Anything episodes, but they're AIMA. That's how he's played that. So that's another a taste of use of the technology. So lots and lots really going on in this area at the moment. And actually, I think one area I was looking into is the generative art that we're seeing through the likes of Midjourney and a range of other tools, and that's been one of those areas people have been wondering about copyright as well. It seems like Adobe are, I don't know if leading the way is the right way to put it, but you are able to use their stock library to access AI generated content. So that means, I guess, that individuals are able to create using AI tools and then submit them to their catalogue of images, which I think potentially does create some major challenges when it comes to copyright considerations. So I'm not sure how that will actually play out, but I imagine they've at least asked the AI what the risks are from a legal perspective of the manoeuvres that they're making.
Yeah, same sort of things happening really in music as well, like AI generated music, and Ed Sheeran won his case this last week. You can't sort of copyright a chord progression, but I think we're going to get a lot of testing going on in all of these spaces in the next couple of years. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, really anywhere where creativity is involved, I think there are going to be people experimenting and seeing what the role of AI is, and it's interesting times ahead. yeah, I'm really, I am really curious for how things evolve. I look at a friend of mine who's a photographer, and how his world has got really massively disrupted over the past couple of decades. I suppose, where a good photo that he might have taken on film before things really had fully moved across to digital. But even in the earlier days of high-end digital cameras, stock photo libraries might charge, say, a magazine $5,000 to use an image that he had submitted, and maybe put that on the cover of their magazine. Now you can source an image for very, very cheap to use for all sorts of usage, and I mean, very, very commonly it's sub $5 US to get access to what might have been 10, 100, or 1,000 times as much in years gone by. So there are definitely big changes afoot, and I think it is important that we keep a watch on the space. We put on our futurist hats, and we're looking forward, and doing the best we can in the areas where we sit to figure out what things could look like, and maybe be a part of creating that next phase. So I think a lot of opportunities here for New Zealanders who are willing to maybe think outside the box a little bit and come up with some new ideas to use this tech. We didn't really talk about Sneak so far, Stephen. So which is it's what you do. Maybe you can just give a little overview for those who are involved, particularly in the world of software development, where Sneak fits into the picture, because it is an awesome piece of technology.
Yeah, so we're primarily working with software development, software engineering sort of houses to help them create secure code without slowing down. This is the key thing. And we just this last week we announced that we're using AI. Well, we're actually using supervised machine learning, because I don't think sort of general AI is here just yet. But we're using that to make sure that how you solve security vulnerability problems that developers introduce all of the time is a lot easier for the developer. So we curate a number of different answers or solutions to the problems that we see in developers' code, and just make it easier for them to do that. Because typically, when you're writing code or you're using someone else's library, that's now actually how breaches are occurring. About 65% of the time, people are getting into insecure code through the coding errors that are being made, basically at a developer level. So that's really what we do. We go out and talk to development houses and in-house sort of development shops, and help them to build things more securely, so the data doesn't go elsewhere.
And what sort of size teams are using Sneak? Is it sort of relevant for since that are doing software development as well as our our big players?
Yeah. So from organisations with a single developer developing sort of a side project on the home from home, absolutely free sort of for that sort of level. Right through to organisations in New Zealand with thousands of developers, and doing it at scale is obviously quite complex, and there's a whole lot of compliance obligations that as businesses start selling their software out to the world and offering services out to the world, there's a number of different sort of levels that they need to achieve in terms of compliance, and we specialise in helping them to achieve those types of attestations. So right across the board. The key to it's actually not changing the way a developer's workflow works. You've got to work with developers and have a solution that works for developers, not for security people, because security tools are pretty much usually just roadblocks that stop the productivity and the value of software from actually being released.
Yeah, no, I really like the approach of Sneak. So thanks for that insight. Now there were a couple of other subjects that we were hoping to get into, but we've run out of time a little bit. And I'll mention for listeners that want look a little bit further. Peloton recalling 2 million bikes due to injury risk, which is concerning. They've been having some challenges. There's been news of a lot of phones coming pre-infected with malware, and this is sort of the more budget end of Android
phones, watches,
devices.
tablets,
A whole range of devices. You're right. So be cautious of those those devices that aren't from a big well-known brand that you might be willing to trust. If it's a brand you've never heard of, then your risk is probably going to be increased there. And we've also heard of Google Chrome ditching the padlock for padlock icon. Tune icon. And there's been a bit of media coverage around Temu, the shopping app, which is launched in New Zealand. I see the Herald with a story there. It seems to be that they're pushing it very, very hard, and there are concerns whether this is a trustworthy organisation to be giving your data to and spending money with. But the ads I've seen are offering things at maybe 1/10 or less of the normal price in some cases, or that's what it reads. I have come across people that have ordered and received things off Temu, but you might want to do a little bit of background reading on them if you're thinking of signing up to buy things from them. So
Yep, I did exactly that a couple of days ago.
Okay.
Haven't gone with Temu because I hadn't done the research.
Yeah. Good call. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us this week on the New Zealand Tech Podcast. We'll be back again next week. Big thank you, of course, to our show partners, Gorilla Technology, HP, Spark NZ, 2 Degrees, and 1NZ. So we'll catch you then, everyone. And thanks again for joining the show this week, Stephen Phillips.
Thanks, Paul.
Cheers.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.